Good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rachel Marston, the Associate Director of the Literary Arts Institute at the College of St. Benedict. Welcome to tonight's event, a reading by and conversation with author Nicole Walker. I would like to acknowledge that both the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University occupy the original homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. We honor and respect and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples forcibly removed from this territory whose connection remains today. St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey previously operated boarding schools for Native children. Now students, faculty, and staff are working to repair relationships with our Native Nation neighbors. A few reminders. Please silence your cell phones or other devices if you have not yet done so. There will be a question and answer following the reading. Nicole's books are also for sale at the back of the room, and she will be available to sign books following the Q&A. I also just want to note we are aware that it is the last night of Ramadan, so I know some of you may need to leave to be able to break your fast at the end of this, so we understand if people need to step out early due to that. Nicole Walker is the author of Processed Meats, Essays on Food, Flesh, and Navigating Disaster, published in 2021, and co-author of the After Normal Brief Alphabetical Essays on a Changing Planet from 2019. She is the author of 5 additional books of nonfiction, a poetry collection, and co-editor of 2 essay collections published by Bloomsbury. She has written several essays for the New York Times and is a noted author in several editions of Best American Essays. She edits the Crux series at University of Georgia Press and nonfiction at Diagram. She teaches creative writing at Northern Arizona University. Nicole's writing explores the nuances of our relationship to the world, from how to cook lengua, at least 2 different ways, to bats' capacity to revegetate landscapes devastated by natural or man-made disaster. From watching as forest fires burn closer and closer to your home, to the precarity of the human body. Her essays highlight the cognitive dissonance of our contemporary lives, such as when Nicole unpacks the word sustainable as something we are doing and can keep doing, language that allows us to feel virtuous even as we find it hard, if not impossible, to change what we do. Her work is often or always, putting these ideas in conversation with each other, reminding us of the inextricable connections of things seen and unseen. Her essays mirror this web of connections, and like her formal choices, her art is capacious, not just in the range of her curiosities, but in the sense of having space, exhibiting a generosity for herself and for us, for finding beauty and joy, even as she reminds us that not everything that goes comes back, even as she invites us to not look away. Please join me in welcoming Nicole Walker.
Hold on, I had glasses. Oh, here they are. I'm so organized. Hello. Thank you so much for coming here tonight, and thank you, Rachel, for hosting. Thank you, Steve Woodward, for driving so far. Thank you, Matt, for coming and hosting this event along with us, and thank you to Catherine Rupp for organizing all the complications of having a guest writer here for a week. So I'm here for 3 more days in case you want to get more of this. But I want to begin briefly with watch, it takes a minute. I want to begin with a presentation about, or an explanation about what this essay that I'm going to read about is. And I have an obsession with brine shrimp. Maybe you know brine shrimp, maybe you don't. Maybe you know about sea monkeys. They're a small, there was a marketing scheme for brine shrimp in probably the 80s and 90s. You can still get them. If you Google on, or if you go on Amazon, you can get seamonkeys.com, and you can find brine shrimp. But what I've brought for you tonight, if you're interested, is a little cup of brine shrimp cysts. And you are welcome to take these. All you need to do is put them in a jar of water, add a little bit of salt. No one knows how much. Choose your amount of salt. Shake it up and see what hatches. These little guys inside here are whole lives. Quickly, I want to show you them on the road because they're quite exciting. Oh, but then once you go to full screen, you're trapped forever. Hello, full screen. No one likes you. Thank you. Okay. These are my brine shrimp that actually my sister grew for me. So I did get a package of sea monkeys at one point, and I got them to grow. This isn't part of the essay, so it's not a spoiler. I got them to grow, and they were doing really well. And I was like, you know what? You guys need some fun times. So I got a stick from a batch of aquarium stuff. And I was like, I'm gonna put a stick in here, and maybe a rock, and you guys are gonna have a blast. They had a blast, and then they died. Okay, but here's my next batch. Okay, watch. Can you see? Okay, see that guy? There's a fatty. Like all the stuff floating around is algae, and that's what I feed them, or I think I'm feeding them, because I am not a scientist. I am a brine shrimp farmer. See the other one? Oh my gosh, see this one down at the bottom? Literally, y'all. So you take these little guys home, put them in some salt and distilled water. That's important. Can you all write this in your notebook? Distilled water. If you give them chlorinated water, it will not happen, and they will also die. Distilled water is key. Let's watch that one more time. Actually, I mean, if I could give a talk and I could just play my brine shrimp fantasies, I would. Okay, but now I lost it, and the internet is hard. Hold on, come back, little baby. Here we are. It's not as good this time, because it's in QuickTime. Let's go back to QuickTime. Well, all right. You only get to see it once, because Nicole's media skills are limited. But you saw them, yes? You saw them? Okay, I'm going to put them at least up so you can imagine what they look like. So, brine shrimp to me are important in ways that they're not important to very many other entities in the world. But they are really important to, here's the one. I don't know. Oh, I know how I got it. So, sorry, I know how I got the good version. I literally had to email myself, text myself, and then post it. Here we go. Neat. There we go. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. All right. Like I wake up every morning, I'm like, I'm still alive. I'm still alive. I'm still alive. And what's the time now? So this guy in the top, she might be pregnant and be having babies. And then the black dots are algae with these little white things. Do you see those little white things? Those are baby brine shrimp. They're called Nicole, and they're tiny and they're awesome. Okay. Anyway, that's my obsession, and that's what I will be reading about. Y'all are going to come up, if you'd like, and take one of these cups and take the brine shrimp cysts, which are these impacted little brine shrimp that are mostly, they seem like they're dead, but with the proper care and water, you can bring them back to life. And you'll see how that works in this essay. All right. This essay is called Everyone Wants to be a Brine Shrimp. In 1847, as the wagons emerged from, oh wait, can you hear me? In 1847, as the wagons emerged from Emigration Canyon into what is now called Salt Lake City, a band of silver blue water streaked across the western horizon. The pioneers must have been enchanted by the promise of a lake, a refuge from the arid trek they'd made from Missouri. Soon enough, immigrants realized that the lake was too salty to be of agricultural use. But still, this valley held its perceived promise. Rivers ran from the mountains to provide fresh water to grow the homeland they desired. Although Shoshone and Paiute peoples had practiced irrigation for years, the settlers began in earnest to divert that fresh water to their crops and homes, and eventually businesses and mining operations. That diversion has worked so well that these days, Salt Lake boasts one of the fastest growing population centers. To visit Salt Lake, a city in the second most arid state in the country, is to be surprised by how green the landscape is, how Edenic in its emulation of Illinois grasses, Missouri hawthorns. Linden and maple trees line the wide city streets. Lawns Lego into perfect squares in front of bungalows and duplexes, mini mansions and ranch houses. Golf courses undulate across wide patches of town. Farmers grow beets and corn and alfalfa for horses and cows. The settlers took the mountain water destined for that western edge, blue-gray lake, and converted it instead to the geometries of green that color the valley. The Great Salt Lake holds the remains of Lake Bonneville, that ancient lake, once vast and as full as many species, or even more than your own gut biome. Earlier climate changes, like the end of the Ice Age 14,000 years ago, forced Bonneville to retreat into its shallow western edge. The water evaporated. The salt stayed down. No longer teeming with myriad sea creatures, now the Great Salt Lake teems only with brine shrimp, the only creatures that can survive the salinity of a sea that collapsed on itself, doubling down on its minerals, then doubling again. Although the pioneers didn't find the lake useful to their purposes, the lake is not useless. It supports millions of migratory birds. And unique to this lake, algae prefers the heavy salinity of the Great Salt Lake and feeds the billions of brine shrimp that feed those migratory birds. In addition to feeding the birds, the brine shrimp form an industry that packages the shrimp for aquariums across the world. But descendants of those pioneers mostly ignore the lake, that one avoids the garbage dump. It will resolve itself, just as a landfill does, sending gases into the atmosphere, liquids to the water table, and everything else will linger until some of that lingering becomes useful again, and a brilliant startup figures out how to mine the landfill for its gems. But unlike a landfill, the dump trucks have stopped depositing their goods. Snowmelt once funneled its watery products west and down. Now snowmelt feeds alfalfa farms to feed cattle. It waters lawns, it fuels industrial turbines, it washes cars and dishes, it flushes waste, it spins laundry, it fills water bottles, it quenches everyone's thirst, but the lakes. In October 2022, the water level in the Great Salt Lake reached an historic low. The lake, divided in half by a causeway, prevents fresh water from reaching the northern end. The salinity is now too high, even for the life that has adapted there. And the water, a great protective blanket, holds down the toxins that have been dumped, trapping what has been buried by mining operations, arsenic, antimony, copper, zincorium, mercury, selenium, and other heavy metals. As the water evaporates, those toxic metals would be exposed to wind, which will carry them up to the Wasatch Mountains and beyond to Wyoming. The only thing that doesn't evaporate and get blown eastward are the brine shrimp. Tiny enough to be lifted, they prefer their sticky, hostile habitat. But even lovers of hostile environments call uncle when they can't breathe. 2, I forgot to read the 1. I circled it and said read the 1, but 2, it's in sections. 2. When I was 5 years old and had just learned to read, my mom and dad sat on the couch on either side of me and read a book about how bodies became pregnant. Although it was a children's book, the writing was clinical and the pictures stiff and uncomfortable. This was just before Where Did I Come From came out. The more comic, cuter images of clouds and fat babies version of, oh my God, I didn't even ask the sex ed explainer. The formal and thin characters of my book must have displayed some of their body parts in this unwarranted and unwanted lesson, but the image I remember best was the pencil dot in the middle of the page that represented the egg. The narrator explained that the egg was this small, barely visible, and that sperm, even smaller than that pencil dot, could only be seen through a microscope. The smallest of babies struck me as miraculous. I love small things then and now: miniature teacups, miniature pigs made out of marzipan, and miniature bears the size of miniature toy poodles. The idea that humans grew from an egg the size of a pin fertilized by a swimming thing several times smaller than the egg amazed me. Throughout my childhood, I studied A Child is Born with its romantic language and each stage of the fetus depicted as if someone were in the womb with a camera. The photos have been manipulated to magnify and light the tiniest fetuses to make them look a little more baby-like. But I was always drawn to how alien the babies looked. An embryo at 6 weeks of growth is still smaller than an adult brine shrimp. It might also look a bit like a brine shrimp, with its tail a bit like a tadpole. The 6-week embryo swims in a uterus that forms an ecosphere to itself. Everything the fetus needs is provided by the mother. Some say that the book A Child is Born eludes the gestator's existence, since the camera pays no attention to her identity or the work her body does to protect and to grow the shrimp. A study in the journal Science investigating endurance exercise found that pregnancy equates to running a marathon every day for that pregnancy. No one watches films or TV shows about pregnancy as an extreme sport. But if you ask a pregnant woman how she's feeling, she will exhale deeply at you and bow her head so you can slip the gold medal over her head. Though she must be careful not to knock the baby, once it's born, in the head with its medallion while she nurses. 3. I didn't mean to fall in love with brine shrimp. In 2017, for my birthday, my friend Angie gave me an ecosphere, an egg-shaped glass enclosure in which 3 brine shrimp swam among oxygenating plants in a carefully balanced, magical kind of system. The brine shrimp were meant to live 6 months. 2 years later, my brine shrimp still swam between the tiny oxygenating branch of coral that produced the algae that fed the shrimps. That year, I took the ecosphere on a book tour through California. As I explained in my book, The Afternormal, an abecedarian about how climate change affects albatrosses, frogs, igloos, grasses, opossums, possums, and whistles, I passed the brine shrimp around the audience to show how their habitat is a synecdoche for our planet. This carefully balanced glass egg is as perfect as the earth. The brine shrimp are perfectly fine as long as nothing upsets the balance. I held up the sphere and said, "These are magical creatures in a magical chemical system. All food is provided, all waste is recycled, all chemicals equally distributed, just like a perfect atmosphere." Analogy made, I handed out blue and green marbles. These are your tiny planets. Don't lose them. I strike metaphors too hard sometimes, but everyone took their marble and carefully slipped them into their purse or pant pocket. A year later, I met somebody at a writers' conference who had been at my talk. He produced a marble from his pocket. He said, "I always keep it with me." I'm enchanted by brine shrimp. They are known adapters, but I wonder, as the lake dries, becomes more saline, can they survive this extreme and extremely fast change? Can the brine shrimp grow to be, can the brine shrimp adapt to a life in a habitat of a wide range of salt concentration? Brine shrimp grow to be about 1 centimeter long. They are the largest creatures in the Great Salt Lake. Because of their ability to adapt to different levels of salinity, they live in both the north and south arms of the lake, divided by a causeway that literally causes the north side of the lake to become saltier as it receives, unlike the salt arm, almost no new fresh water. Brine shrimp eat microscopic algae, Donalia viridis. Donaliella are soft and nutritious, but adult shrimp can eat all kinds of cyanobacteria and diatoms, which grow well in the south arm of the lake, but struggle to grow in the over-salty north. The better balanced south arm takes good of their tiny creatures, providing sustenance as well as space to grow. What brine shrimp lack in individual size, they make up for in abundance. Over 17 trillion brine shrimp live in the Great Salt Lake. An eared grebe, just one of the millions of birds that feast on the shrimp, eat between 25,000 and 35,000 brine shrimp per day. As one of the primary migratory bird stopovers, the Great Salt Lake provides the food necessary for birds to make it to their next stop north and then feed them thoroughly on their way back south again. It takes a lot of energy for migratory birds to fly up and down continents. 17 trillion brine shrimp are just the right amount to sustain the metabolism of 10 million visiting verbs. 4. If you Google, what should pregnant women ... Google will autofill the rest of the question for you with the word eat. Then Google will return to you 671 million entries. 671 million isn't as many web pages as there are brine shrimp in the sea, but the internet teems with delicious information to stream through the baleen that is your brain. Similac, a predominant brand of baby formula, occupies the first entry. If there's a perfectly designed for wellness drink for babies, why isn't there one for pregnant humans? Not only do we have to distill... That's how we knew I wanted some water. If there is a perfectly designed for wellness drink for babies, why isn't there one for pregnant humans? Not only do we have to distill the advice, we have to shop for and concoct our own nutritional intake. In the Google list, Johns Hopkins Medicine is the fourth entry. Since there is no Similac for pregnant people, Johns Hopkins advises pregnant people to eat their food the hard way, with cooking and with teeth. Johns Hopkins connects the nutritive purposes for each of the superfoods. 1, vegetables. Carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, spinach, cooked greens, tomatoes, and red peppers for vitamin A and for potassium. Fruits, cantaloupe, honeydew, mangoes, prunes, bananas, apricot, oranges, and red or pink grapefruit for potassium. Dairy, fat-free or low-fat yogurt, skim or 1% milk, soy milk, so anti-fat, for calcium, potassium, vitamins A and D. Grains, ready-to-eat cereal and cooked cereals for iron and folic acid. Proteins, beans and peas, nuts and seeds, lean beef, lamb and pork, salmon, trout, herring, sardines, and pollock. I imagine that Johns Hopkins thinks pregnant humans eat mostly like carnies who run the tilt-a-whirl across from the food court. They must believe that pregnant people need reminding that carrots do not come in a food truck. Once you start manufacturing humans, the internet/world/Johns Hopkins becomes invested in your diet. The list of foods to eat is short. The list of foods to avoid is long. Food trucks, carnivals, fast food, delis, raw sushi, and fresh cheeses like feta, queso fresco, blue vein cheeses, and camembert, and smoked seafood. When I was pregnant with my first child, I felt hemmed in, hampered, and vesselized. I did not want to be a walking environment. I felt like an aquarium, belly on display. Johns Hopkins shaking the right kind and right amount of flakes of fish food, cooked or cooked, not raw, into my tank, taking my pH balance daily, blood work, ultrasound weigh-ins to make sure I wasn't fucking anything up. Embryos are not as sturdy as brine shrimp, who feed on the algae and live with bacteria. Bacteria from foods like deli meat and raw cheeses potentially threatens the fetus's native environment. 9 months of no queso fresco, no hot dogs, no sushi, no Caesar salad, no pate, turn the pregnant person's body into a laboratory. We're running experiments in here. Try not to contaminate with your regular person, regular turkey slices, regular raw fish eating ways. It's a fragile, delicate environment. You don't want to upend the balance. 5. Brine shrimp are sensitive to their environments, but not particularly fragile. Adept at adapting to extreme situations, they come prepared with strategies to extend their survival. Brine shrimp are gender tamperers. Sometimes environments prompt change in their sex. Sometimes other environmental changes require them to adapt. Brine shrimp have no say in the salinity levels in the lake, but they do have the capacity to employ their plasticity in order to adapt to radically altered environments. When conditions in the Great Salt Lake become especially hostile, dormant brine shrimp embryos lay protected inside cysts until conditions improve. The Science Journal of Frontiers in Physiology published an article, "The Brine Shrimp Artemia, Adapted to Critical Life Conditions," says, quote, Under extremely critical environmental conditions, for example, when seasonal lakes dry out, Artemia takes refuge by producing a highly resistant encysted castrula embryo cyst capable of severe dehydration, enabling an escape from population extinction. Cysts can be viewed as gene banks that store a genetic memory of historical population conditions. Their occurrence is due to the evolved ability of females to perceive forthcoming unstable environmental conditions expressed by their ability to switch reproductive mode. In addition to turtling up into cysts and waiting for the water to return, female brine shrimp can reproduce asexually, usually by parthenogenesis or regular sex with males who are slightly smaller than they are but still cute. Parthenogenesis requires no oversight by the internet nor Johns Hopkins. I want to take stock, or even purchase stock, in these potentialities. I want to hoard my gene bank for when environmental conditions become more hospitable. I want to live beyond severe dehydration, beyond evaporation, beyond wind blowing my chemical brethren asunder. I want to have the kind of patience for my species as brine shrimp have for theirs. I want to think ahead. I want to plan ahead. I want to take refuge in the dream that all that was will be again. I want my children to spring forth from my head like Athena from Zeus and land in a well-balanced environment where what goes in goes back out in equal, non-toxic proportion. As the Great Salt Lake changes shape, the brine shrimp are acting up. They're drying out, ready for the next world. They're tantalizing their male partners, then faking them out, flipping their naughty bits into headgear. Is the Great Salt Lake dying? Possibly. But the brine shrimp are prepared just in case. And what reads a bit like a eulogy, Terry Tempest Williams wrote in the March 25th, 2023 issue of the New York Times about the lake, the malignant colors, shapes, and smells eerily mirrored the imaging of my mother's late-stage cancer. I knelt to caress the body of the Great Salt Lake, my henna-painted hands now tattooed in intricate designs by the feathered bodies of den brine shrimp. Later in the article, she uses she pronouns to refer to the lake. Twitter users excoriated Terry Tempest for equating a body of water to a woman. They made fun of her for giving human status to a lake. Maybe it was the mother idea that bothered them. Women and mothers take up enough space, I imagine they felt. I, too, have trouble with the gendering of lakes and nature, but not for the same reason. If you name it she, it will suffer at the hands of he. Maybe if we called things Father Lake, Father Nature, we'd be cowed into carefulness. No father likes it when you chip the paint on the walls of the house, let alone coat the floor of a water body with detritus like mercury. Being a mother means your body takes the brunt of its children's nutritional needs, their fetal desires, their in utero demands. If the earth had been a father, not a mother, maybe we wouldn't have depleted her like a fetus depletes the calcium of her host bones. 6. Polycystic ovarian syndrome makes conception hard for some people. The ovarian glands produce more testosterone, causing fluid-filled sacs or cysts to grow on the ovaries like little impenetrable barnacles. These sacs produce more androgens, stunting the egg's growth and causing other problems like growing facial hair, missed periods, and thinning hair. In general, the ovaries perform male attributes, which makes pregnancy difficult because the whole system is subject to a kind of binarism we try to avoid in the social realm, but in the biological realm, we apparently must still obey. Opposites attract, etc., etc. In infertility, we usually assume the fault is with the egg. Maybe we just need to poke it to make it more penetrable. Some poking can be done with drugs. Some fixing can be done with retrieving an egg or 5 and poking it with a needle and inserting some wily sperm directly. But sometimes, as with brine shrimp, the problem is with the sperm or the relationship between the egg and the sperm. Perhaps the host water body, aka vagina, is too acidic, too alkaline, too salty. How is it that when one does not want to get pregnant, it is so easy to do so, and when one does, it becomes so difficult that you're assigning pH terms to your vaginal mucus? And then sometimes the problem is with the metaphor. Is the brine ship here the egg, the sperm, the finally cell-replicating embryo? We're all tiny things in a big salty thing, blood, semen, water. It is amazing that any of us survive our environments. And yet, here we are. They were made directly for us. We tiny, we swim. 7. The brine ship situation is dire in many saline lakes, not just the Great Salt Lake. But researchers watch in real time as salt crystals stack where water molecules once piled. As agricultural, residential use, mining, and damming increase, less fresh water reaches the lake. As the lake becomes more saline, the brine shrimp stocks shrink. The northern arm of the lake has been oversaturated with salt for a while now, but even Gilbert Bay, on the other side of the causeway, has reached 27% salinity. No brine shrimp have been found in the bay. As the Great Salt Lake changes shape, the brine shrimp are acting up. They're drying out, ready for the next world. They're tantalizing their male partners, then faking them out, flipping their naughty bits into headgear. Is the Great Salt Lake dying? Possibly. But the brine shrimp are prepared just in case. S.J. and Jesse E. Quinney College of Natural Resources at Utah State University compare Great Salt Lake to the Urmia Lake in Iran. Both have similar depth, size, and geographical setting. Lake Urmia has lost most of its ecological and cultural function, but the Great Salt Lake has not yet crossed that precipice. You can hear the ellipses burning out from the yet. Already birds suffer for the lack of food. Utah Public Radio reported that 95% of all eared grebes stop at the Great Salt Lake. Eared grebes, once they stop to rest, don't fly again for 9 to 10 months. They live most of their lives on the Great Salt Lake, feasting on brine shrimp. There's no other place for them to stop in the western United States. If 95% of the eared grebes rely on the brine shrimp of the Great Salt Lake, 95% of the eared grebes will die. Northern shovelers fatten themselves on the shrimp, but the shrimp are missing. Instead, they eat brine shrimp eggs, cysts, which they can barely digest. Northern shovelers are dying of starvation. Cysts are not very nutritious. Plus, the brine shrimp were counting on them to bring their genetics into the next go-round. In the human body, cysts are small egg follicles that don't grow to ovulation. You learn a lot about cysts when you're trying and failing to get pregnant. The dream is to stimulate the egg follicle into ripe and receptive material, like Jell-O. Like Jell-O awaiting bananas. Or, in Utah, sometimes carrots are installed inside the Jell-O. Heck, sometimes even hot dogs are put inside the Jell-O, although that may be too on the nose in this metaphor. Imagine a cyst, hard-shelled like a fully developed chicken egg, no way in, no way out. 15 months after the party Angie threw me, one of the brine shrimp did die. Then, things inside the ecosphere got a little strange. The water turned murky, the 2 remaining shrimp stopped moving, light reflected against the glass instead of through. I missed my tiny orange friend. I was worried about the other 2. I moderated the temperature as best I could. I tried not to shake the egg. I didn't take the shrimp on any more road trips. A year or so after that, another shrimp died, then the next. I shouldn't have been so sad. They lived 7 times longer in that bubble of a planet than they were supposed to. But I thought they were amazing little guys, so I grieved and looked to find another ecosphere. But the only ones I could find were made of plastic instead of glass. 9. When I was trying to get pregnant, it seemed easy. I'd been pregnant before, although I hadn't grown any of the embryos to term. Not everyone is suited to be the Great Salt Lake, and even if you are, it might take time to get there. The ghostly shoreline of Lake Bonneville etched its memory chalky line as the lake withdrew to its leathery basin. Seashells from all kinds of sea life teemed the foothills, but as the lake salted up, the fish and crustacean dried up. The only creature the lake could house were those vigorous, adaptable fish. Since I had been pregnant before, I assumed it would be easy to get pregnant again. but I didn't understand about freshwater lakes versus salty lakes. When you are a very young person, all kinds of fish want to swim in your belly, but as you get older, it takes a special kind of fish. I ate all the proper foods, including the cliched pickles and ice cream, in order to get pregnant. I reined in the eating of hot dogs and sushi, tightening my belt like Lake Bonneville tightened her shores. I flipped my legs over my head after having sex to get shrimp to implant on my uterine wall. During development, inside her mother's womb, a female fetus comes stocked with 6 million eggs in her ovaries. By the time she's born, 5 million of them will have shriveled up and died. By the time she hits puberty, about 40,000 eggs are viable for sperm to infiltrate and fertilize. If I put 40,000 brine shrimp eggs in homemade salt water with twigs, how many of those eggs will hatch? Conversely, if I put 100 million sperm in the vicinity of the egg, how many eggs will fertilize? It is not only the fault of the egg and salinity. Sperm are subject to climate crises of their own. Have you heard of wearing boxers when trying to impregnate someone? Gentle sperm deliverers. Cool the testicles, my dude. Lay off the beer and Winston's, my friend. Keep that water and even 72 degrees Fahrenheit for proper hatching. The Great Salt Lake grows and shrinks. In 1983, snow stacked itself deep on the Wasatch Mountains. Skiers skied until May. Then the temperature spiked, and all that snow seemed to melt at once. Streams that meander through Liberty, Fairmont, and Murray parks turned into raging rivers. The road that severed the town east from west turned waterway. Sandbanks lined the street. Utahns lined the sandbags, watching the snow slide westward toward the lake. Governor Bangerter enlisted industry to solve the problem flooding. Great pumps siphoned floodwaters from the lake and blew them into the salt flats just west of the city. Or rather, they would have turned them on, but evaporation and aquifer suck restored the lake to more reasonable boundaries before anybody flipped the switch. The pumps still await their destiny. It snowed over 800 inches in the Wasatch Mountains this winter, 2023. Perhaps those rusty 40-year-old pumps can still be put to work. By 2003, 20 years after the Great Flood, astronauts studied the Great Salt Lake from space. The halophilic bacteria in the northern, saltier side of the causeway reflected red. The shallow pools waved turquoise, ambers, russet links into space. The outlines of the lake, though still visible from the space station, constrict. Since 1986, when the lake stretched to Bangerter's pumps at 4,212 feet, the lake has been in retreat. In the fall of 2002, the lake hit a 20-year low, measuring 4,198 feet. 20 years later, the lake is at its lowest level ever, 4,188 feet. Those who measure the water level have become a different kind of astronaut. You can see them suited up in hazmat gear as they walk across toxic waste, once buried by water, to reach the edge of the Great Salt Lake to measure what it has lost. 11. It didn't have polycystic ovarian syndrome. My periods were regular. According to pH strips, my vaginal fluids registered normal, but I still, legs flipped overhead, couldn't get pregnant. I seem flippant now, which I can be because my kids, Max and Zoe, exist. But at the time, I felt horrible, like it was pure poison on the inside, made of acid. I felt guilty about my previous abortion. I couldn't have had a baby then. It might have killed me. But maybe this was karma. You had your chance. The gods of balance chimed down from above. What is the difference between hope and faith? Faith requires no proof. Foolish hope requires just a little. I touched my breasts every morning to feel for soreness. I practiced Kegels to keep my pelvic muscles in shape with the sight of maybe I can clutch an embryo into the uterine fold. I ate pickles and ice cream and hope. What facts did I have? I'd been pregnant before. My friend Julie, my age, got pregnant. My sister Valerie got pregnant. Humans can, in fact, do this simple thing. Why couldn't mine, right now, not? When my period came every month regularly for 2 years straight, 24 regular, furious periods signifying nothing, I tried to force my brain to give up, to quit hoping. My mom said when the scent of boy craziness wafted from me like Axe body spray, she said, "Don't look like you're looking." I tried the trick of God's balancing into looking like I gave up. I didn't want to have a baby. Who would bring a baby into this lake shrinking world anyway? How you can call something loss when you couldn't even hold it? Tough. Brine shrimp should be easy to grow. If something can survive in salinity 3 to 5 times greater than the ocean, if hardiness is the adjective always modifying the shrimp, if these shrimp can adapt to live in waters whose salinity spans 14% to 27%, then shouldn't you just be able to drop those brine shrimp in a bucket full of salt and water and watch them hatch? Called sea monkeys in another marketing life, people used to order them by mail. I've heard stories that people successfully grew their sea monkeys, so-called because Harold von Brunhant, who visited a pet shop and saw a tank of brine shrimp awaiting their fate as fish food, thought that the brine shrimp would be a great way to teach kids about nature. He named them sea monkeys because brine shrimp tails whip behind them in the form of a question mark similar to monkeys. It's a stretch to see these crustacean carapaces as mammalian, but if shape is your diagnostic gift, then perhaps you can embrace these monkeys. Mainly, Van Brunhart thought they were cute, which they are, bright, orange, and adorable. I missed mine. I wanted to bring them back into my life. One night, with my in-laws in town eating leftovers, I carefully spooned a teaspoon of cis into distilled water. I dumped in some salt, turned on a pump for aeration, set some glow lights above to warm the makeshift tank. Eric and I didn't sleep that night. The lights were bright, the pump loud. Eric elbowed me in the night. "It sounds like someone's peeing." I told him the eggs needed air. It should only take 24 hours. But when I looked the next day, nothing happened. I remembered fertility is hard. I added some more salt. Eventually, I gave up on the brine shrimp eggs and dragged my son Max to PetSmart. "We're going to get some already hatched shrimp," I told him, "and some premixed saltwater made by the same experts who make fish tanks for display and possibly helped organize Lake Bonneville when she receded to her Great Salt Lake stature." The internet warned me, hatching brine shrimp is not as easy as it looks. Even harder, possibly, than hatching chickens or squirrels or babies. These puppies need all your attention. Also, a light that never goes out and a water heater. I asked the man at PetSmart if he had any brine shrimp. Just the ones in the refrigerator," he said. "They're already dead, right?" "Yeah, they're dead," he said. I looked in the fridge, and they looked like the shrimp from my ecosphere, the ones that had died. I missed them. I would have revived them if I could. But I couldn't. So instead, I asked the guy for some salt water from his big red garbage bin of salt water. He filled up my mostly clean milk jug. "Can you recommend a heater?" I asked. The brine shrimp needed to be 72 degrees to hatch. "How much water do you need?" he asked. I held up the milk jug he had just filled, a gallon. Then he handed me a tiny heater, and I handed the cashier $17.99 and was now into this for something $40 and several 24-hour periods of disappointment. It was fine. I had been disappointed with the fertility of the universe before. 13. The winter of 2023 provided some relief for the Great Salt Lake. With snowfall over 800 inches in the Wasatch Mountains, the lake rose 3 feet this spring, but the lake level still sits at 4,191 feet elevation. A better number would be 4,200 feet, which would allow some give and take. The snowmelt of 2023 will help, but it will take years of that amount of runoff to fill the lake. As it stands, the north side of the lake is dead, except for the few bacteria that turn the water pink. The legislature contributed a whopping $232,000 to mitigate the release of toxic dust across the entire western United States. The brine shrimp are stuck in small pools. Pelican chicks, once safely born on islands, can now be taken by coyotes and foxes who cruise along dry ground. Perhaps it's time to turn Governor Bangerter's pumps around. Attach those pumps to every hose bib and irrigation pump in Salt Lake and turn the water to its original destiny. How much can humans do to fix the problems they've made? The poet Audre Lorde said about the patriarchy, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." Human demands and innovations fill the lake with toxins, then turn the convection oven on high, evaporating the protective blanket. But the brine shrimp have a cyst plan. What do we have besides rusting pipes? 14. Have all natural processes gone haywire? And if so, should we intervene, even when the results may be purely delightful? To get pregnant should have been a natural process. But after 2 years, it was time to call in industrial favors, rig, pump to follicle, and see what science could provide. Spontaneous generation, spontaneous combustion, spontaneous sex, these things happen inside the home. But if you want to ensure success, sometimes you have to turn the systems inside out. Thanks to human innovation, the systems are on display as if through a window. Look closely at the anatomy. Put the shrimp under the microscope. Let's see what you can do in here. Intrauterine insemination isn't a magical procedure. It takes the pure science of conception and adds 1 ounce of centrifuge, a few stirrups, and the muscle it takes to plunge a syringe. The process wasn't the one I wanted or expected, but the result will still be enchanting. Next week, I'm driving from Flagstaff to Salt Lake with my kids, Max and Zoe. We're going out to the bird refuge, which is flooded, but the drought comes back quickly in the west. For now, the grebes find food. Perhaps I can scoop a few brine shrimp into a jar and see if I can rebuild that once perfect sphere. Thank you. Okay, it's better to go out on your once perfect sphere. Okay, so friends, what I have in these little cups are brine shrimp cysts. And I invite you to take some brine shrimp cysts. You can take them, put them in a little jar. You have to use distilled water. Can everybody repeat after me? Distilled water. That's the hard part. That's right. So, because chlorine will kill them, or will not allow them to generate. So, these are essentially brine shrimp eggs, but they are so dried out and encapsulated in the form that you can send them to the moon and back, whatever, they won't change. But once you get them going, you can have these delightful little creatures. Well, I'll show you again in a minute. So you're welcome to take them home. If you don't want to take them, that's totally fine. And if you want to take them and pretend that you're interested in doing this, that's also fine. But it's really, really simple. Distilled water, again, throw in some salt. Why not? It's the Great Salt Lake. How much? Who knows? Put them in the cyst, shake them up. Okay, what if yours hatch? Then what do? Then you have to find some algae, but guess what? You all live in a lake-filled universe. I have to buy algae from Minnesota, because I live in a algae-free town. Okay, but look what you can have. All you have to do, and you have these creatures from this nothingness, and they will live here. That person is huge. I'm not sure who it is. I think it's my sister Paige is a scientist, so she tells me this stuff, and she says that's a male, and he's looking for a female, and he does these somersaults, and at the top he's eating algae. That's the big guy. But look, there's all these little guys, and also, as I mentioned in the essay, I took my old brine shrimp on the road trip, which I was going to bring to y'all, but then I realized I couldn't put them in my luggage because who knows what happens. I mean, they probably would have been fine because they're brine shrimp. But I also wasn't allowed to take them through the checkout service. What's it called? TSA. Because, also not checkout service. Because there's too much water. So I didn't bring them, but I brought these instead. All right, and that is the end of my talk about the brine shrimp and Great Salt Lake and ecospheres and planets and babies. And do you have any questions? No, that's too many. That's too many things to talk about in 20 minutes.
So where are some of the other places that have brine shrimps other than Great Salt Lake? You mentioned that it's not the only place that's having issues with water load and so on.
So I think everywhere, even the ocean has brine shrimp. But the nice thing about the Great Salt Lake is that they're super concentrated. So you can essentially scoop them up, package them, and send them to pet food industries. So it's a huge industry for the Great Salt Lake. Other salt lakes have gone too far the other way, so the brine shrimp no longer grow. So the Great Salt Lake is even more important to that industry. But you could, like, brine shrimp exist, like, in the ocean, but it's hard to, like, gather them up in the same way. So the Great Salt Lake is this crazy lake, right? It's gigantic, you can see it from space, but at its greatest depth, it's like 5 feet. It's a really weird lake. It also smells like sulfur. It smells really bad. There's brine flies, which I'm not going to write an essay about because they're not as cute as brine shrimp. But it's this very strange environment. But it feeds all of these creatures. And so there's, and it only feeds the creatures actually in the Bear River Refuge, which is at the far, far north end of the lake where the Bear River comes down, which is this freshwater. So the freshwater mixes with the saltwater. The part where people do brine shrimp harvesting is in the south arm, and they just collect them off the top and just be like, delicious. We'll take these to our baby fish. Any other questions?
So, and I know you're going to talk more. I'll mention this again. There's a craft talk where Nicole will talk about writing personal essay and the braided essay, but in this you use numbered sections.
Oh, yes.
Right, but in a number of your essays, even your, so I'm just curious about the choice. When do you decide to make that decision of like numbering sections versus using white space or other forms of transition?
So, I mean, I think this one is so braided, right, that I make such big leaps in this essay. Like, I do not need transition sentences. I'm really not interested in helping you, like, make the metaphor. It's like very unreader friendly in a lot of ways. That the numbers, I think, at least alert people to, like, okay, this is that kind of essay where you're like, okay, at least I can compartmentalize it and hold one section in my mind and then another and then another. So it's really a readerly gift in a unreader-friendly way. I think other essays that are not numbered, the metaphor is more closely made, and I feel like I don't have to shepherd the reader through the essay quite as much.
What's the revision process like this?
This is such a great question because so before I came tonight, and even though I still stumble over words, which is annoying, mostly I think that's because I get crazy. So I wrote this essay fast. This is one of the fastest essays I ever wrote because it's for a new project. So I wrote a proposal for this project about brine shrimp, and it's all about brine shrimp and gender and climate change. But I literally have no idea how that's going to come out, right? So at least this is the first essay of that project that at least makes a sort of one-to-one comparison, an analogy of sorts. So I wrote it, and then I was like, this thing is. And then I stepped back a little bit, and I was like, okay, I see the thread. And the thread is this idea of an ecosphere, and that, of course, larger metaphors, another big planet, and it's one big ecosphere. But the other one is like this idea of gender, right? And I'm not sure how this is going to work out in this book idea because I don't really want gender to be super forward, but at least in this essay, I could talk about how, as a person with a uterus, right, you're expected to do all this stuff for this creature inside you, which is in some ways great, but in some ways, like, who are you to tell me what to do with my inside of my uterus? So it's that kind of conflict of being told what to do with your body versus trying to imagine how you actually grow something. So you're kind of irritated, right, that people are telling you what to do. And then you're like, oh, so what? I'm also trying to grow something. So you're probably telling me what to do. Because, I don't know, like, again, who's gonna figure out how to grow these brine shrimp? Saline, saline, distilled water, and a lot of pressure. So that one came to me easily. But as I embark on the rest of the project, I feel like I have a lot of different weird ideas of where to go. And I don't know if it's like, should one get weirder as one writes more? Maybe, maybe not. But so this essay is going to be in the middle between the weirdest and the most normal. It's not the weirdest way I could think about things, but it's definitely not like the most straightforward way to talk about these things. But one of the things that, one of the ways I write is, what I hope to do is, again, I know there's a weirdness and it's kind of like a crush of like ideas that come to you. But my hope is in that crush that something sparks. And that happens for me. Like that's how I transition from one section to another, back to Rachel's point. Like, I'm like, okay, some idea in my wild writing, something's connected, and then I can move to the next section. And my hope is even if my writing doesn't quite get to that big, huge abstract understanding of the universe, because I just don't think that's my way, my hope is that readers hear it, and then also writers go on to write their own version, to think, okay, that inspired me in some way. Like, Nicole, that was a little much, but I'm going to write my own version of that. Like, that's what I really hope for my writing in a lot of ways, and that's why I'm a teacher as much as I am a writer, is that I want to make the weirdness sort of spark other ideas.
How did you approach like the research aspect of this essay? Was it kind of out of like a love so much for Brownship that you were kind of doing the research and then well, I might as well write about this because I love it so much? Or was it more kind of like, I want to write an essay about Brownship, let me do the research?
No, definitely the former. So, I mean, my friend Angie gives me this ecosphere with 3 brine shrimp, and they're just amazing. And I fell in love with them in ways that one should not fall in love with things that are not even, like literally not even a centimeter big. But the other thing is my sister is she's a biology teacher and environmental science teacher for Taylorsville High School in Utah, and she is a big brine shrimp expert. So I've been gathering all this knowledge for years, and so I finally put it to use. But often that's not how it works. So this is a particular one, like it's been brewing in my mind. But sometimes, like I will just dip in to some sort of research. So I was trying to write something today, and I happened to be in Minnesota, and the Itasca, thank you. Itasca State Park, right, where the headwaters of the Mississippi are, became something that I wanted to research just because I happened to be in a place. And so I think often, that idea that where I'm at can really influence what I'm writing, and to just do a little bit of research of, the history and the ecology of the place that you are in can be really inspiring to me. Any other questions? What are you doing?
Well, are we having, is there another question?
No, wait.
Yeah.
But yeah, you finish up, and then y'all need to come up and get your brine shrimp. Look, okay. Well, you will come up and see, and I will post you in your brine cyst. Yeah, there you go.
An attorney. All right, thank you all for coming tonight. Nicole is going to be again giving a craft talk on Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. in Quad 264 at St. John's campus, where she'll be talking about the craft of the personal essay and the graded essay. Her books, a couple of her books, or 3 of her books are for sale in the back. If you are interested in reading more of her beautiful writing, and thank you again to Nicole.